Chapter 1. Will couldn't believe what he was seeing. He sat watching as archived news clip scenes unfolded on the TV. The Gateway Arch and the Space Needle in Seattle fell. Buckingham Palace was engulfed in flames. The Louvre had been bombed and witnesses cried as glass panels fell onto its priceless contents. Only one of the towers of the Cathedral of the Intercession could be seen through the smoke billowing from the remains of the Senate. Smaller targets had been attacked in Australia, Canada, Japan, and several suicide attacks had been made throughout Israel. All this had happened within the last week. Now, the President of the United States stood before a joint session of Congress and asked for war to be declared. Even without a clear enemy, the Congress voted yes. All that was horrible. The day before there had been an attack on Mt. Rushmore. Terrorists had managed to climb the cliff face during the night and planted massive charges. The resulting explosions had destroyed the monument. The attacks on New York and the Pentagon 2 years earlier had shaken the whole country, and the ensuing war on terrorism had ground to a slow crawl. The country's military had been extended to its limits while chasing suspects and organizations. All the while bin Laden and his crew used the military actions to recruit new followers from around the world. But the worst part for Will was the vote held after the declaration of war. They reinstituted the draft. Will just couldn't believe it. The president was addressing the nation from the podium in the House of Representatives. The government had been preparing for this for the last 3 months. New induction medical centers had been created to manage the millions of draftees as they were processed for mental and physical fitness. In addition, the Coast Guard now reported to the Department of Defense, and basic training installations had been prepared for the flood of draftees. The president paused dramatically before continuing to announce that every person registered with the Selective Service between the ages of 18 and 22 would be processed in order to establish training schedules. On top of that, young women 18 years and older were also going to be called to duty. Applause from the joint session of Congress was more sporadic. The president asked for an immediate vote on a bill he had submitted a few months earlier that would expand selective service registration to include women. That vote didn't go as well as the declaration of war. But it did pass, however, narrowly. Stunned by the developments, Will suddenly remembered that he was late for work. Grabbing his car keys, he ran out the door and drove himself to the offices of Interglobal Insurance. Will had been contracting as a web developer to improve the company's intranet. Working his usual magic on the company's intranet server helped to drown the turmoil he was feeling for a few hours before coworkers learned of the new developments. After that, the workday was ruined. They all ended up listening to internet radio broadcasts of the growing situation. The next 2 weeks brought even more turmoil. Iraq and North Korea responded by announcing an anti-Western alliance. Osama bin Laden led a coup, which killed the Saudi king and took control of Saudi Arabia. He then quickly joined the Iraq/Korea alliance, which was now being called the New Axis of Evil by NATO. Together, Saudi Arabia and Iraq conquered and annexed the smaller countries of the Gulf of Arabia. Faced with the new alliances and coerced with threats invasion, Iran joined the new alliance. Palestinians quickly announced support of Iraq and the new Saudi government as other Muslim nations and old enemies of the United States and NATO quickly pledged support for the anti-Western cause and joined the Axis. The mood for the next few weeks only worsened as Axis forces invaded Turkey and more countries joined the United States in declarations of war. 3 weeks after the declaration of war, the first draft notices arrived in the mail. They directed people to view lists posted in post offices and made available on several government websites. Every guy in the office was listed on the websites. A few days later, the girls who had registered first were listed as well. Draftees didn't have to report immediately, they had several weeks to report to an induction center for tests. On the bright side, if there was one, individuals who reported before the deadline could choose which branch they could join. Otherwise, people would be conscripted and assigned according to the need of the military and test results of the individual. Not everyone had to report right away. The lists were organized by age. Several of Will's office mates were quite relieved that their age placed them into a much later draft category that may not ever be called. The atmosphere was gloomy while Will ate lunch with the office staff. They all contemplated futures that were now very uncertain. "I don't know what to do," Will's cube-mate, Alex, complained. "I don't believe in killing, but now there's this draft. I don't want to do this and there's no way out." Half-jokingly, Janelle spoke up, "You can always say that you are gay." Several others in the group laughed. Alex was well known to be a ladies' man. "I don't think I can do that." Alex blushed at the thought. "I don't think I could be convincing enough to pull it off." He mockingly leered at Janelle. "I think they would catch on pretty quickly." "I don't think it would matter," Will broke in. "You know about that don't ask, don't tell policy that Clinton introduced." That brought a new round of grumbling. Apparently a few of the guys had been considering that as a possibility. Especially Gary. Going into military service would separate him from his life partner, possibly permanently. Christy spoke up next. "You know, we could always tell them that we're transsexuals." "I'm sure that's not covered by the don't ask, don't tell policy." That idea brought genuine laughter, especially after Gary started tugging at Christy's blouse sleeves and asked her if he could borrow it. Later that evening, as Will sat watching the news unfold on his TV, a commercial featuring RuPaul jogged his memory and he mulled Christy's suggestion. It didn't take him long to decide that being branded a freak for the next few years was better than risking his life. After deciding that, it was easier to decide to go the next day to volunteer. That way he wouldn't have to worry anymore. He wouldn't be drafted and that would be the end of the matter. Realizing that just saying that he was a transsexual may not be enough for the doctors in the induction center, Will stayed awake all night doing research. After searching the internet for everything he could tell the interviewers, he concocted a story to convince them of his new status. It wasn't hard. So much of what he read struck a chord for him, and with his fertile imagination it was easy to fill in the blanks and make his own life seem like that of a transsexual. Morning came way too quickly for Will. He hadn't slept well with dreams of his mother shouting at him for playing with dolls. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he dialed the switchboard at Interglobal and asked to be transferred to his supervisor. Mr. Croy answered the phone with his usual pre-coffee flair. "Mr. Croy?" Will began weakly. "I can't come into work today. I have an appointment." Will grimaced. If he had an appointment, he should have notified management several days ago. "Oh. That's kind of sudden." Mr. Croy asked skeptically. "You didn't say anything about this yesterday." "Yes, I know. It was a letter from the draft office. I guess they need some people quicker than others." Well, at least that was partially true. Hopefully true enough that Mr. Croy would buy the excuse. "All right, there's not a lot that can be done about that." Mr. Croy relented. "Tell Gary good luck if you see him there. I think he got one of those letters too." "Oh crap," Will said as he hung up the phone. The way Mr. Croy said that sounded like he knew there were no letters. The important thing was that he had the day off and only had to deal with Gary possibly knowing his plan. Hopefully the intake interviews would be short and he would have the rest of the day to relax. The intake center was at the National Guard Armory and was pretty easy to find. Will parked his Tacoma and started walking across the parking lot when a familiar voice shouted his name. "Will!" Looking around, he saw Gary waving at him. Gary said something to Paul, his boyfriend, and they both gestured for Will to come over. "I'm surprised to see you here," Gary started. "You know Paul, remember? From Carrie's going away party." Will took the offered hand and returned the surprisingly warm and firm handshake. "Are you going to try to get out of this too?" Paul asked politely. "Gary is going to tell them that he's a tranny." "A what?" Will had pictures of Gary trying to convince some sergeant that he was part of a car's machinery. A tranny, you know. A transsexual. Gary did a quick twirl, and for the first time Will realized that the white shirt and slacks that Gary was wearing were not from the men's rack at Target. I have a friend who dresses for fun and he let me borrow this. You like? Gary was obviously proud of himself. What are you going to tell them? Now Will blushed. He wasn't quite ready for Paul to know his plan as well. Oh! Paul caught on quicker than Gary. You think you can pull that off wearing a ball cap, dirty shirt and jeans? Now Gary joined in, not very ladylike, you know. They'd never believe you. Will hadn't thought of that. Well, you know, it's just an excuse. I didn't think. I mean, I don't have. Embarrassed and off balance, Will shut his mouth with an audible click. His eyes sparkling. You know, Will, I do have some other stuff that I borrowed. We could go back to my place and find something more convincing. Paul just smiled and nodded in agreement. You guys just want to do that so you can watch the straight guy squirm. Will searched for an excuse. I couldn't, you know I'm not gay. Gary acted offended, and what has that got to do with the draft? Wrapping his arm around Will's shoulder, he guided him toward his car. And besides, what if we do want to watch you squirm? Will laughed, releasing some of the nervous energy that had building inside of him. Okay, but no dresses. Relaxing, these guys weren't making a big deal. And they knew what he was planning, and they were offering to help him succeed. At very least, dressing up would help his story be more convincing. The ride to the guy's apartment was surprisingly short. Most of the morning commuter traffic had died down and the roads were fairly clear. Gary and Paul chatted about the commitment ceremony they were planning for the next weekend. Will relaxed as they talked. The ceremony was all Gary had talked about for several weeks before war was declared. Maybe things will be okay. Gary and Paul seemed confident the transsexual idea would work and there was no reason for them to change their plans. Gary hadn't lied about having more clothes. It looked like his friend had been using the guy's apartment as a safe place to change. Paul pointed out the dresser that they were letting him keep clothes in. Apparently their friend had been cross-dressing for years and his wife was okay with it, only so long as he did it away from her. Opening drawers at random, Will chose a pair of slacks and a blue top. How about these? Gary and Paul shook their heads. What's wrong? Will was feeling cornered and frustrated. Let's see some of that famous gay fashion sense and show me something. Will tried to defensively maintain a shred of masculinity. Maybe if he didn't have to choose, if someone else took over, he really wouldn't be cross-dressing too. After all, dressing up was a choice. Will forced himself to relax. This was a costume, that's all, just a costume. He tried to fervently convince himself, but didn't believe it. Paul and Gary conferred quickly. You know, this isn't our thing either. But color is color. And this lacks any of it. Paul held out the same gray slacks that Will had chosen, but instead of the blue top he now held a white silk blouse with cloth covering the buttons. Gary came up with a pair of black suede flat-soled shoes and a new pair of flesh-colored knee-highs. I bought these. Gary shook the package of knee-highs cause I wasn't about to shave my legs and wear a skirt. If your feet aren't hairy they'll look fine. Taking the clothes, Will stepped into the bathroom to change. Staring into the mirror he steeled himself and slowly began to change clothes. Paul and Gary laughed as Will stepped back into the hall. The clothes look fine, but you need to shave and loose the ball cap. Gary stepped past Will and showed him where the shaving cream and razors were kept. Thank God you wear your hair a little long. We can brush it into something more femme. Gary waved a can of mouse and a brush menacingly. We've seen flommers do it enough times to make it look good. Will went back into the bathroom to shave. Looking at the small selection of cologne shaving creams, he decided to just use soap. As he finished, he counted himself lucky that they hadn't made him change underwear too. Just then Gary shoved his arm through the door and held up a pair of nylon panties. Just in case they want to do a physical too, you want to look the part, you know. Will took the panties and set them on the counter. Memories of his dreams the night before flashed through his mind, his mother yelling about dolls and now something about a Halloween costume. He quickly changed underwear and was tucking the blouse back into the slacks when he opened the door and announced that he was ready for them to do his hair. He thought about why some guys like to dress up and couldn't figure out what they found so exciting. They were just clothes. The slacks were a little loose around his hips and the blouse felt light and cool against his skin. Other than that, it was no different than his normal work clothes, just prettier and oddly more comfortable. True to their word, it didn't take long to make his hair look less masculine. They even managed to get the impression that his hat had left to look like a soft curl. After slipping on the shoes, Will was surprised to find that they fit loosely. Gary explained that their friend probably had bigger feet. After making sure that the shoes wouldn't fall off, the three left the apartment and made the short trip back to the armory. There were a few more cars in the parking lot and Paul suggested that he drop them off and wait for them in the car. He had his cell phone and Gary could call him if it looked like the interviews were going to take a while. Paul stopped behind Will's Tacoma and Will took the opportunity to toss his clothes into the passenger seat. He wanted to go straight home after the interviews and promised that he would return the clothes to Gary at work the next day. As they entered the main building, they followed signs pointing to where the induction interviews were being held. As they approached the room, Gary pulled Will to the side. "I was thinking, they might notice that we came in together. If they ask, we know each other from a support group and decided to come in together for mutual support. Also, I was thinking that the Air Force would be the best bet for us to volunteer for." Will hadn't thought about any of this and agreed to use Gary's suggestions. Just then the door to the interview room opened and a young man wearing a camouflage uniform, barely out of his teens, he did a double take and looked them over. "Okay, I guess you two are first. Come on in and we'll get started." Footsteps could be heard coming down the hall and Will hurriedly stepped to follow. Thank goodness they had got there early, at least this way they may get some privacy and won't have so many people staring at them. "Have a seat," the young man indicated a chair next to a gray metal desk. "My name is Specialist Thompson. I'll help you fill out this paperwork and answer any questions." He handed Will a stack of papers, clipboard and pen. "We have to do all this paperwork and administer the ASFOB before we can do anything else." "ASFOB? What's that?" Will asked, worried about the horror stories he had heard about the Army's love for giving shots to recruits. "That's the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery," SPC Thompson said. "It's what we use to determine what career you would be best at." Noticing Will's hesitation, he continued, "It will take a couple of hours. I hope you made time. You could be here all day." Will felt his heart shrink. He had hoped to play Unreal 2 when he got home. Yeah. I have the day free." He started working on the paperwork, which didn't take as long as Will had thought it would. As he finished the small stack and handed the clipboard and pen back to SPC Thompson, another door opened and a man wearing khakis and a polo shirt asked Will to come in as soon as he was done. SPC Thompson looked relieved and said, "Mr. Anderson is our interviewing doctor." Glancing at Will's clothes, he continued, "You may not have to stay the whole day after all." That was good news. Will stood and walked into the office. Maybe the day wouldn't be a bust after all. It looked like the plan was working. After shutting the door, the doctor sat on the edge of his desk, studied Will's appearance. "So, mind telling me why you're wearing those clothes?" he asked in a very bland tone. It sounded as if he had asked this question hundreds of times. Will stammered. I'm a transsexual. All right, how long have you been a transsexual? The doctor asked nonplussed. Okay, this is it. Will thought to himself and took a deep breath. I suppose I have been all my life. His voice was shaky but gained strength and conviction as the story he had created the night before rolled off his tongue. I first remember thinking I was a girl when I was 5. My cousins had come over for Thanksgiving and were spending the night. They were 2 girls, one was 7, the other was my age. I remember they had pretty cotton nightgowns that they hated. I convinced Cindy, the one my age, to trade for my pajamas. She did, and we slept in each other's nightclothes. I got in trouble the next day when my mother asked me why I was wearing a nightie, and I told her I was a girl too. After that I remember playing house with friends and borrowing their dolls to play with at home. That went on until I was 8 and again was caught by my dad. It was Halloween and I was going to go dressed as a girl. Well, when my dad found out that I had been playing with dolls, he realized that it was more than a costume to me and got angry. After that I became more careful and kept things hidden. I didn't play dolls or dressed up. I just lay low and learned how to play boy games. That kept me out of trouble. When my dad died I was 13. I didn't go to the funeral because I was scared that he might be in heaven and would know my secret. Instead, I stayed home and looked through my mother's closet. One thing led to another and I tried on some of her dresses. I knew then what I had to do. I guess it was the clarity that grief can give folks sometimes. I finished high school early and got a job as an entry-level web designer. That was 2 years ago. Now I am living life on my own. I'm trying to work up enough money to start seeing a shrink and transition. Will finished and caught his breath. The doctor was nodding his head. I see. Well, I'll tell you what. You know that the military has an unofficial policy about homosexuals. Will interrupted, I am not gay. I want a sex change. I am not gay. The doctor smiled. Okay, I understand. There is no policy that I know of that will allow you into the military. I'll get your paperwork and make some notes in it. You might have to come back in a week or so to sign some additional papers. Also, they may require you to speak with another doctor. I am recommending that you not be considered for service. The doctor opened the door for Will. Thank you for coming in, Mississippi. Will looked up in surprise. That is right, Mississippi? The doctor was watching Will's reactions. Oh yes, that's right. Will acted pleased. It's just that not many people give me the courtesy. With that, Will left the armory, changed clothes, and pleased that the plan worked, immersed himself in computer games. The next day at work everyone wanted to know what happened at the induction center. Will and Gary were quickly tired of repeating themselves. At lunch Gary admitted that he told the interviewer that he was a transsexual. And that the same morning another T-girl had showed up and made his interviews a lot easier to bear. The doctor believed him and Gary had been turned down for military service. Everyone was happy for him and turned to hear what had happened to Will. Yeah, I saw Gary there. He was with someone, so I left him alone. Gary was looking straight at Will and nodded in understanding. Anyway, while I was filling the paperwork, one of the questions was if there were any histories of disease in my family. I marked scoliosis. At this point Will paused dramatically. I hurt my back in high school. The way it healed makes me look like I have a curvature. The doctor failed me on the spot and didn't even bother with taking x-rays. Everyone thought that solution was brilliant and no one could top it for sheer believability. Only Will knew it was complete BS, and Gary of course. It was much easier to concentrate on work after the adventure at the armory. Will was on a creative high as he developed new ways to create scripted web page navigation that worked in the most popular browsers, even Opera. Work was rolling into his email and rolling out just as quickly. He felt like he had won the lottery. At work, Gary matched Will's enthusiasm. Gary had been a graphic designer since finishing high school, now he was learning Flash. It opened whole new worlds for him. He was able to create interactive websites without having to learn HTML or some other language. His latest project was just the icing on the cake, an interactive slot machine for an Indian casino website. If the week was stellar, the weekend was pure magic. Friday night, Will decided to try the new 70s club, and while there met a girl with whom he spent the next 2 days on the lake. He had never liked the idea of casual sex. But Mandy was far from casual. She gave Will an experience that he swore he would learn to duplicate and master. With Mandy, things that Will had only considered foreplay became forever intertwined with the act of sex. Her fingers moved over his body and caressed him as if she were worshipping her own sensuality through his. He had never thought his nipples could be so sensitive. And the way she played with his tool, she gently flicked and circled the tip without ever grasping it. She massaged his inner thighs and gingerly kissed him. She had him trembling and crying before she finally mounted him and brought him to fulfillment. Will then did the same for her, with her coaching him to just the right spots. Paul surprised Gary outside of the office. He had a limo waiting, and together they drove downtown to watch the latest music circus production of Man of La Mancha. They sat spellbound as they watched the imprisoned writer transform himself into the deluded knight who jousted with windmill giants and saw a serving wench as a lady in a castle. Together they dreamed the impossible dream and lost themselves to the fantasy. Afterward they had dinner at Crawdad's. Crawdad's dance floor was under repairs from a wild party a couple of weeks before. It was sinking into the river. They decided to go dancing at Faces. The Friday night crowd was there and several of their friends waved as the couple pushed their way to the floor and started moving to a rhythm all their own. Saturday and Sunday passed in a blur of shared passion. When Monday dawned, Will and Gary were both exhausted but happier than either had been in a very long time. Will was looking forward to the idea of encounters like that weekend becoming the norm as more young men left for mandatory service. Conveniently forgotten was the fact that women were being called as well. Gary was equally ebullient. Paul had taken the weekend to reaffirm his commitment to Gary. With no worries of separation and the relief that they both felt, their lovemaking was able to be the celebration that it should always be. Not even the letters that were waiting for them from the draft board could dampen their newfound feelings of euphoria. The letters simply confirmed what they had told the interviewers and requested that they come back Wednesday for follow-up interviews. Obviously, the government wanted to make sure that they weren't being scammed. While Will didn't particularly like the idea of dressing up again, he didn't mind so much either. This time the letter gave instructions to go to a different section of the building. Away from the induction center and with a separate entrance, this detail promised more privacy. In fact, the letter even stated that the concern for privacy was of great import due to the lack of understanding demonstrated by some individuals. That line only helped bolster Will and Gary's spirits. The transsexual plan was not only working but better than either had expected. If the military bureaucracy was able to recognize that people had problems with this and that they could be harmed, well, so much the better. Will talked with Gary the next day and arranged to meet at Gary's apartment to get ready. Gary agreed with Will that this would most likely be an interview with a shrink and they should make extra efforts to research their story and make themselves more believable. Even so, Gary still managed to surprise Will when he arrived at the apartment Wednesday morning. There were 2 other guys in the apartment and Paul was nowhere to be seen. "Relax, Will," Gary began. "These are a couple of friends of mine. They work in Tahoe as female impersonators in a show." Gary smiled at the shocked look on Will's face. "Don't worry, hon, they're here to help. And they promised to make you pass." "Pass, what? Is this a test?" Will was genuinely confused. One of the strangers stepped toward Will and extended his hand. "I'm Al and he's Dave. Passing is when no one notices you're a man. It's not just about how you look, it's some subtle things too." Over the next hour, Will allowed the two professional gender benders help him get ready and listened carefully as they told him how to walk, sit, and even how to shake hands. They laughed when he asked them if there were any pointers on speech. "Oh, that will take way too long. Just when talking to a man, be more formal, and when talking to a woman, relax and always look at whomever you're talking to." Dave started, then Al interrupted. "Don't always look them right in the eye, that's aggressive. Instead, follow their hairline or jaw or whatever. Study the face, don't just look at it." Dave picked up again. "You can drop your eyes when talking to a man, but never look at him when you do it. Look at the floor right behind him, that's seen as passive and guys think women are passive." With those pieces of advice, the duo announced that Will and Gary were ready, and should check their appearance in the mirror for any small details that may have been missed. This was the first time Will had seen a mirror since entering the apartment. His reflection was not stunning, but it was different. Then Will realized that he had hips. Reaching down, he felt the pads that had been sewn into the undergarment that Dave insisted he wear. Out of curiosity, Will turned and could see the curve of his but had been enhanced by the garment as well. Al had placed small gel inserts into Will's bra and now it looked like he had small, but developing breasts. He grinned as he thought fried eggs and mosquito bites. Al had also used some stage makeup to cover Will's beard before dusting his whole face with a powder that matched the skin on the inside of Will's arm. No other makeup other than brown mascara had been applied. Noticing that Will was studying his face, Dave said, "Sometimes, little to no makeup is better than lots, especially when you are trying to pass. You don't want anything to draw attention, so Al just did the basics to make your skin look even and smooth." With that, Gary joined Will at the mirror. "Wow, we don't look totally like women, but we sure don't look like normal guys either," Gary said in a soft voice. "That's the idea," Al said. "You want to look like transsexuals trying to start out. You don't want to look like bombshells. That always takes a few years. Besides," he paused thoughtfully for a second, "you didn't look this good last time, so a big change would be more noticeable." "Exactly." Will was catching on. "We don't want to have any changes be too noticeable because transsexuals want to blend in, not stand out." He felt as if he had a major revelation, and it fit his own philosophy: if you don't get caught, you don't get in trouble. Will rode with Gary to the armory. Finding the entrance was just a matter of driving to the back of the large concrete building. They found a vacant slot and parked. Gary asked a few questions about Will's cover story and explained that he was using a more accepting past and that Paul was his fiancé. Gary agreed that using actual facts helped make the cover more convincing. Apparently his parents were supportive of him and always thought that transsexual was just another word for gay, which made his story even more believable. Once inside the building, they discovered that it was just a back entrance to the office section where they had been previously interviewed. They waited hesitantly at the door looking for any indication as to where they should go next. They both jumped when the door right next to them opened and a man in an army uniform asked them to come inside. "I'm First Sergeant Clemens and this is the CO Captain Dupreez." He indicated the only other person in the room. "We thought we should greet you and maybe make you a little more comfortable." Captain Dupreez held out his hand. "You have created quite a stir around here." He motioned towards some cushioned chairs and sat behind a large wooden desk that looked like it was Korean War surplus. "Honestly, we expected all sorts of stunts. People don't like being drafted. We've even had a few clingers come in. Guys in dresses and hairy as an ape." Everyone laughed politely at this visual. "But you two look and act the part even more today. That's why you were asked to come back." The captain looked toward his first sergeant. "If you would continue?" At first we were going to take the doctor's recommendation, but DoD regulations required us to investigate a little closer. What do you mean? Will was getting paranoid. The first thing we did is call your work. According to them, you both are in good standing with your employers, and they had nothing bad to say of either of you. He paused, thinking, except you, Mr. Samuels. They said that you might be gay. Gary grinned. Yes, I don't dress up at work because it could cause a lot of problems, if you know what I mean. It's no secret that I like men, so a lot of people just think I'm gay. He finished this with an embellished flourish of his hands. Will took the opportunity to embellish his own story. I don't dress for work either for the same reasons. I don't date a lot and don't talk about my private life with coworkers. Yes, the sergeant agreed. That sounds like what your agency said. They actually knew very little about what you do outside of work. Moving on, the captain said while he leaned forward and rested his elbows on the edge of the desk, that's why we thought it would be prudent to get a second opinion. He smiled and continued, we asked a psychologist to come here today and interview you both. Of course, you don't have to. It's not a requirement. But it will help us make a decision. He left the comment hanging. Obviously, the decision was to accept Will and Gary into the military or to mark their records as being undesirable for service. Will and Gary glanced at each other. They had discussed this very scenario the day before. Okay, they said in unison. All right then. The sergeant handed them some papers. These are release forms so that the doctor can discuss her impressions of your conversations. Anything you tell her will be held in confidence. All she can tell us are her impressions. After the paper was signed, he stood up. If you would wait here with the captain, I'll be right back. Sergeant Clemens left the office. Carefully shutting the door, he opened the one right next to it. Well, what do you think so far? He asked the lady sitting at the desk and taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Captain Dupree's voice could be heard coming from an intercom sitting on the desk. Interesting, I can tell they are nervous. But they didn't seem to be thinking too hard about what they told you, and they both agreed to further interviews with little to no hesitation. They didn't seem rushed like they were hiding something, nor did their answers sound rehearsed. She paused reflectively. I'll know more after I've interviewed them, but my impression right now is that they are either genuine or very good actors. I need to see their reactions, not just hear them. I'll bring Mr. Samuels over first, since he is the more questionable of the two. It's not the first time a gay man has tried this to get out of the draft. Will sat quietly in the office while the sergeant and captain discussed the duty roster for the next day and the rotation of vehicles for maintenance checks. They carefully ignored Will as he sat nervously waiting his turn with the doctor. He rehearsed the story that he had told Doctor at his first interview, and wondered why he hadn't been able to get it out of his mind during the week that had passed. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice when the office door opened and Gary stepped it. Will, she wants to see you now. Gary looked relaxed and had a smile on his face. His interview seemed to have gone well enough. Will stood and gathered himself mentally before stepping into the hallway and shutting the door behind him. He noticed the door next to it was open and looked inside. Hello, come on in. Gary nervously said hi and stepped into the office. The doctor shut the door behind him. I'm a psychologist and I was asked by the captain to interview you again to establish if you really are what you claim. She sat in a chair in front of the desk and indicated that Will should take the other one. Perhaps you can tell me about yourself? She asked while settling a legal pad on her lap. Well, even with his mental rehearsal, Will still had difficulty starting. I am a transsexual. Will grimaced, nothing like restating a topic to try to convince someone of something. I first remember thinking I was a girl when I was 5. I used to get in a lot of trouble when I was a kid because I would insist that I am a girl. When I was 8, my dad caught me playing with dolls. It was Halloween and I was going to go dressed as a girl. Well, when he found out what I was doing, he refused to let me dress as a girl and go trick-or-treating. He knew that it was not a costume to me and got angry. After that, I became more careful. I didn't play dolls or dress up. I learned how to play boy games like football and baseball. That kept me out of trouble. When I was 13, my dad died. One thing led to another and I tried on some of my mom's dresses. I told myself that it was grief and that I was looking for comfort. By that time, I had almost convinced myself that I could live as a normal boy. After that, I have dressed in private many times and even collected a small wardrobe. I finished high school early and got a job as a web designer and my own apartment. Now I am living life on my own. I'm trying to work up enough money to start seeing a shrink and so that I can transition. I need a couple of doctors' approval before I can start hormones. I see, the doctor wrote a couple of quick notes. So you haven't been taking hormones? No. Will answered truthfully. So how do you explain? She waved her pen at his chest and hips. Oh, Will grinned. She had noticed and assumed that he was already on medication. These are falsies and I am wearing a padded girdle. Well, it's very realistic. She wrote a couple more notes. Where do you get things like that? You can get anything you want on the internet. Will had a flash of memory. The girdle is custom made based on my measurements with those of a natural woman superimposed on a computer model. He was glad that he had done his homework. Well, it looks nice. Have you told your family? No notes were taken this time. No, I haven't. I haven't seen or spoken with anyone in my family for several years. And my mom is so paranoid that she told me if I ever went gay she would come out here and kill me herself. That last bit surprised Will. The words rung true in his mind, but he couldn't remember a situation where his mother would have said such a thing. I see. I don't think I could blame you for cutting off contact. Do you intend to ever tell them? This time the doctor did write something. Well, yes, I suppose, after I have transitioned and got the surgery. Will thought for a moment. You know what they say, it's easier to ask forgiveness than ask permission. The doctor nodded in agreement. Have you seen any other counselors or therapists? No, Will could swear that he had said he was working toward that goal. Was she trying to trip him up? Why not? Isn't this tough to go through on your own? Yes, it is. I have been planning on seeing a therapist but haven't had the money. I don't get insurance through my agency. Oh, that would make it tough. Have you thought what you would want to do if the military accepted you? That question had not occurred to Will. It was like asking a kid what he wants to be when he grows up. I suppose I would want to learn more programming. I mean, I do web stuff now and that just gives me a taste of what can be done. Okay. I think that will be all for now. The doctor pulled a loose sheet of paper over her notes and stood up. One last question though, what do you want to be called? Another question that Will had not anticipated. The bratty bunch popped into his mind. There was Jan, Marcia and Cindy. Cindy Janice Marshall. Now the doctor extended her hand. Will was careful to hold his hand palm down like he had been coached until he shook hers lightly. Thank you, Miss Marshall. I'm going to recommend that you be denied military service because of your condition. Will was grinning widely when he stepped back into the captain's office. Gary stood up and raised his eyebrow quizzically. Is there anything else, Captain? Gary asked. No, you can go now. We'll inform you of our decision within a week. The captain stood and ushered them to the door. I want to wish you both luck. Will thanked the captain as Gary opened the exit door. After they were outside and the door had shut behind them, Gary looked at Will and stage whispered, "It worked." She said she wasn't going to recommend me for service. Will congratulated him and admitted that she was doing the same for him. Inwardly, though, he was confused. The answers he gave in the interview were too easy, and he was feeling that he believed most of them himself. And that was more disturbing than trying to defraud the United States government. Captain Dupreez listened to the sergeant report what the doctor had said before she saw Will or Gary. Only after he had heard Gary's car start and saw it drive away through his window did he use the intercom to call the doctor over. "So, what do you think now?" he asked as she stepped into the office and opened her notebook. "I believe them. Of course, I couldn't really get to know them like I would a regular client, but they both seem to be fairly well-adjusted, thoughtful, and seem to be aware of their circumstances. They both recounted times when their feelings have caused them hardship. Both their stories flow on lines that are fairly consistent with the transsexual phenomena." She paused to catch her breath. "Excluding further examination and interviews, I have to recommend that neither of them be allowed into military service. Their lifestyle would cause distraction and may possibly cause greater psychological trauma." "That takes care of that," the sergeant said. "When will you be able to give us written reports?" "I'll type them up and fax copies for you tomorrow." "I have to keep the originals." "That's understandable. Thank you for your help." The sergeant held the door for the doctor as she left. "Well, that's that," the captain said with relief as he made notes in Will and Gary's files and slid them into the filing cabinet behind him. Will and Gary drove back to Gary's apartment and changed. Will was extra careful to wash all the makeup off his face. They made it into work just in time for lunch. While Gary described his meeting with the doctor to a rapt audience, Will mulled over the events of the morning. Deciding that he was a man, and needing to prove to himself that he was, he excused himself and made arrangements to meet Mandy after work. The war was not going well. The Axis forces seemed to hold all the cards and had been able to successfully hide their activities by using the infrastructures of the countries they attacked. Very publicized arrests had been made in Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and Australia. Despite these arrests, they still managed to maintain steady pressure as more government buildings and cultural sites were attacked. Washington, D.C., Paris, Berlin, London, Sydney, and Moscow were all under martial law, and airports near urban centers were closed to everything except military traffic. Allied forces were deployed to protect major cities and landmarks. They were also serving as border guards and acting as police for the cities and countries that were under military protection. The availability of soldiers to counter the Axis threats was woefully inadequate. Turkey's defense forces were pushed almost to the point of surrender before Russian reinforcements arrived and halted the Axis advance. The Axis forces retreated a few kilometers but littered the land with chemical mines. The illegal tactic bought them just enough time to entrench themselves and prepare for a counterattack that never came. Faced with the daunting prospect of clearing the minefield, the Russian and Turkish armies chose to dig in and wait. They took advantage of the Axis disorderly retreat and gambled, correctly, that they didn't keep track of where the mines had been placed. The vast minefields served as an effective barrier for both armies. Of course, this was bad news for the innocents stuck behind the lines. There was nowhere for them to go to escape the predations of the invaders. Reports from the few who were able to escape painted a grim picture of rape, torture, enslavement, and mass murder. With the nearest northern threats halted, the Axis then turned to conquering Jordan and, with the support of Palestine, quickly surrounded Israel. Mercy flights, reminiscent of the Berlin airlift, kept the Israelis fighting and alive. Egypt fought to keep Axis troops from reaching the Mediterranean Sea, provided an escape route for millions of Israeli and Jordanian refugees. European nations had rallied to provide enough ships to effect a massive evacuation. While 2 American carrier groups provided needed air cover and attacked Axis supply lines. Even the best predictions held that Israel would fall before the end of the year, and more than 20 million people would be trapped by the advancing Axis forces. For Egypt's support of the evacuation, the Axis declared that Egypt would be the next nation to fall before Allah. Meanwhile, North Korea, with Cambodia and Vietnam providing extra supplies and munitions, had invaded South Korea. South Korea managed to defend Seoul and lost only a few kilometers to the invading forces. But with only the support of the overtaxed American military, they could not hold on for much longer. Public opinion of the war had dropped in the months following the declaration. Those in large cities were quick to voice their dissatisfaction as they felt the pinch of travel restrictions. Shipping, however, was enjoying a huge increase in business. The plans for the light freighters that were used during World War II had been updated with new technology. The contracts to build new ships were the subject of fierce competition. The first draftees had finished training and were deployed to reinforce strained defense forces now garrisoning the US and European capitals. Will was working to add the finishing touches to the new insurance claim website when his desk phone rang. Gary's name showed on the ID screen and Will quickly answered. "Hey! Are you ready for lunch?" 11:30 was a bit early to eat, but Will was at a good stopping point. "No." Gary sounded nervous. "Paul just called. He said that there was another notice from the draft board in the mail." "So?" Will wasn't concerned. "They already said that they don't want you." "What did it say?" "That's just the thing, Will. They want me to come in for a physical and vocational testing. It also said to bring my shot records and medical records if I have them." Gary paused to let that sink in. "Will, I really need to know if you got a letter like that too." "I don't know. I haven't been home to check. It just has to be a follow-up to confirm our status. We are in the right age group and we're both smart. They just don't want to let any fish slip through their nets." Will thought a moment. "If it'll make you feel any better, I can call my neighbor and ask her to see if I have anything." Will had given Mr. Williams a copy of the key to his apartment so that he could take care of his plants and fish while he was away on vacation or business. "That would be great." "Oh, and Will, I have a very bad feeling, like I am being watched." Will hung up the phone and opened his organizer to find Mr. Williams' number. Gary had managed to shake Will's confidence and now he was feeling jittery too. The phone rang several times and Will was about to hang up when his neighbor answered. "Hello? Hi, this is Will, your neighbor in apartment D. How do you like that? I was just talking about you." Mr. Williams would talk with anyone who gave him the time or seemed interested. His neighbors in the apartment complex and his grandkids were his favorite subjects. "Oh. Why's that?" "A man from the government was here. He said that he wanted to know when you normally get home so he could talk with you. I told him you usually get home a little before 6. Did he say who he was?" Now Will was very nervous. Gary's comment about being watched may not be paranoia after all. "He left me his card and asked me to give it to you when you get home. The name on the card says Agent Alan Whitehall. The agency on the card is the Defense Security Service. He also left a card on your door. He wanted to know if you ever have friends over and if I had ever met your girlfriend. He was polite, but I didn't think that was any of his business, so I told him that your life is your life and I couldn't tell him any more." That struck Will as odd. Mr. Williams always asked Will about when he would have a girlfriend over. He felt that a single young man should be busy with the girls and not spending all his time alone. "Mr. Williams, could you do me a favor?" Will asked. "Sure, what do you need?" "Use the key I gave you. On the wall next to the front door you'll find where I keep my bills and stuff. Under that you'll see my mailbox key hanging on a hook. Would you get that and check my mail? I think I may have gotten something important today." "Yeah, I can do that, but ain't checking someone else's mail against the law?" "Sure it is, but only if you are wearing a black ski mask and don't have the key to the box." Mr. Williams chuckled, "Well, I ain't got no ski mask, so I guess it's legal." My phone cord reached the mailboxes. "I'll have to put you down. Be right back." The mailboxes weren't far, but it still took Mr. Williams a couple of minutes to get back. "I threw away the junk for you. Let's see here, you got a bill from the gas company and a credit card application and something for a singles club and something from the draft board." "Aw, nuts. Thanks, Mr. Williams. Could you just put all of that on my kitchen table?" "The draft, huh? That's harsh. Is that what you were looking for?" Mr. Williams sounded sorry for the news. He had been drafted at the end of the Korean War and could empathize. "Yeah, thanks. Can I stop by after I get home? I'll bring some beer to say thanks." "Okay. I'll see you then, and don't worry about the draft. The army ain't the end, you know." "I know. Thanks, Mr. Williams." Will hung up the phone and tried to calm his nerves. A letter from the draft board and an investigator was not good news. Gary's phone rang once before he picked up. Will spoke before Gary could even say hello. "I think the shit is about to hit the fan. We need to go to lunch right now." "Oh Christ. Okay, we can go to the Squeeze Inn and get a couple of burgers. We can talk in the car." "Sounds good to me, we can take my car." Will hung up the phone and turned off his computer monitor before heading for the exit. When Will got to his car, Gary was already there waiting for him. "So, you had a letter too?" Gary asked as Will unlocked the car. "Yes, and there was an investigator asking questions. My neighbor said he was with the Defense Security Service." "Defense Security Service? I haven't heard of it before. You sure he wasn't DIA or FBI or something?" "I'm positive." Mr. Williams read the guy's name and agency from a card he gave him. "Then we don't know who he is working for sure anyway." "Still, this is not good." Gary nervously fidgeted with the air conditioning vent before continuing. "I think we need to come clean or something." "I don't know. He could have been there for some other reason." The investigator was from a security agency, not the DIA. Maybe he was checking on someone else. Will liked that idea, but then questions about a girlfriend were odd. If he was investigating someone else, why would he ask about a girlfriend? Well, maybe. Gary let the thought trail off. Maybe what? "I already told folks at work what I told the draft people." "Maybe you should admit that you told them the same thing." "What?" Will felt fear grip his insides. Being branded as a transsexual didn't bother him, it was the thought of how people would react that scared him. And what would they do? What would they say? "Jesus, I'm straight, not gay." And what does that got to do with this? Gary was offended. "I'm gay and it's not so bad. Besides, what does wanting to be a girl have to do with being gay?" "I don't know. I just thought." Will caught himself and looked at Gary. "I didn't think, that's what I thought." "You're right, it has nothing to do with being gay." "Okay, so why not tell work that you're a tranny? You don't have to do anything different. I have done my research too, you aren't the only person with internet access, you know." "What do you mean?" This idea had not occurred to Will. "Well, lots of them don't do anything different at work for a long time. Some only dress in private or with friends. Some never go for the operation. Some only go partway, they look feminine but have all the plumbing intact. We could do something like that. And when the war is over we can say, oops, big mistake. Sorry, I'm not transsexual. But I like girls. I can't hide that." Will felt trapped and was searching for an excuse not to go on with the plan. "So, haven't you heard of lesbians?" I've heard you say you're a lesbian trapped in a man's body. Yeah, but that was a joke. I don't think so. Look, you were more convincing as a girl than I was. You moved well, you don't have a deep voice, and you don't talk all macho. You care about people, and that shows. Heck, you took this job when I know you could have gotten more money somewhere else. And I don't think I have ever heard you talk about a girlfriend. Well, I got one. A buddy anyway, we aren't serious. Will knew he was making excuses to himself. The only reason he slept with Mandy was to prove his manhood. But who was he proving that to? I'm getting a headache. So what you are saying is that I should come out of the closet and tell everyone that I am a transsexual. Yeah, that's what I am saying. The drive to the squeeze-in wasn't a long one, and we'll park the car next to a large mud-spattered truck. The squeeze-in was very aptly named. The place was small, with barely enough room to stand and place an order. A small table with 2 chairs occupied the majority of the free floor space. The walls were covered with memorabilia, old license plates, a picture of Elvis with the owner, President Clinton placing an order, a jackalope, and old menus. Instead of looking cluttered, the place had a unique atmosphere that only served to make the diminutive restaurant even more popular. After a short wait, Gary and Will paid for their burgers and went outside. They ate while leaning on the trunk of the car and watched the traffic drive by. Gary broke the silence. I don't think anyone would give a rat's if you told. For crying out loud, half the department is gay and the other half are hippies. I think if anything happened you would be more popular. I hope you're right, 'cause I like my life and I don't think I would survive in the military. You're gonna do it then? Yeah, I am. Will grinned at Gary. Sides, girls might like it. I could go shopping with them and trade clothes. Gary laughed. Now you're dreaming. Laugh it up, furball. We still have to deal with these letters and that investigator. That comment brought them both back to earth. We need to get back to work. Most of the gang will still be on lunch. You can talk to them then. I think time is going to be very important. The ride back was a lot quieter. Will's nerves were on edge and Gary was concerned about the investigator. No one likes their life turned inside out and inspected. While Will didn't have many friends outside of work, Gary did. And now he would have to tell all of them that he was a transsexual. Gary had his problems, but so did Will. No one thought of him as queer in any way. Mr. Williams would want to know all sorts of details. The folks at the office would pepper him with questions, especially why he lied about what he told the draft board on his first visit. Then there was the question of his self-identity. He had been questioning it ever since the idea of lying to the draft board had been brought up at lunch. And there was Mandy. Gary was right, everyone was still at lunch. Will and Gary walked to the cafeteria and looked for the familiar group of friends. They were sitting on the patio so that the smokers could get their fix and still gossip with everyone. Hey! Look who's back. Dave was the first to notice them. You guys have been spending a lot of time together. Anything we should know? Dave was always joking and needling the others in their group. Yeah, as a matter of fact there is. Will told the draft board that he is transsexual. UASS. Will fumed, that's my business. Sorry, but I thought it would be easier for you if someone else said it for you. After all, you were going to tell them. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was just gonna let myself be drafted. Yeah, right, and pigs fly. Okay, just don't ever do that to me again. Will calmed down. Gary was right, it was easier than breaking the news himself. I told the draft board that I'm a transsexual, Will confessed. Why didn't you tell us? Janelle asked. I suppose I was embarrassed. I thought that all I would have to do was give them an excuse, maybe a follow-up interview or two. No one would have to know. I was wrong. Gary spoke up when Will paused. We're being investigated. Genius, Dave commented, sheer genius. Look, we need you guys to help, Will was begging. If anyone asks you about us, just tell them the truth, that we are friends, we work together, and that Gary and I just told you guys. Okay? Everyone was silent. This was a lot to absorb, and a couple of the guys looked disappointed. It was as if they had their own plans for getting out of the draft. The news of investigations destroyed them. So what are you going to do now? Janelle asked. Are you going to tell Deborah? Eric asked. Deborah was the department supervisor. I guess we will, Will said. And human resources and your agency will, Gary added. So when will you start dressing up for work? Janelle asked. I can borrow some stuff and start as soon as I get the go-ahead from HR and Deb. I think Will is going to need more time. That's true. I don't have anything. Will felt relieved that Gary would be able to break the ice before he would have to come to work dressed. You don't have anything? Not even neutral slacks or something? Janelle asked. Not a stitch, Will answered. Then I guess we'll have to go shopping. Do you know your size? Janelle's eyes glittered. Everyone knew she was a clothes horse and a shrewd shopper. Will looked for help from Gary. I borrowed some stuff from a friend of Gary's. I don't know the sizes of it all. Gary just guessed and I wore it to the interview. All that stuff was the same size. I think it was 16. That seemed to satisfy Janelle. We'll use a measuring tape to make sure. What did you do about boobs? Will blushed. Can we talk about this later? Jill relented. Sure. Are you free tonight? No, I'm not, Will answered quickly. How about tomorrow? Janelle asked. Gary interjected. Look, you're going to have to do this sooner or later. And the sooner you do it, the more convincing you'll be. Okay, tomorrow. But I really don't want to talk about this now. Right after work then, most of the stores will go to close at 7, Janelle said with a note of finality that left no room for debate. Will was felt trapped and like he was losing control of his life. At least none of his friends had judged him or seemed to be treating him like a freak. Lunch was over and the group separated to go back to their desks. Nervous energy made the rest of the day fly by. Gary was still deep in code when Will stopped by to apologize. I just wanted to say that I didn't mean to snap at you during lunch. I was being a defensive jerk. That's all right. I'm sure you're feeling kind of trapped. I still feel that way. I guess the animal in me decided that going down this road deserved company and wouldn't let you off the hook. Gary looked at his watch. Wow, it's already 5, the afternoon flew by. I guess that's what happens when you're having fun. That's what this is called? I wouldn't have guessed. I'll see you tomorrow. Mr. Williams was watching for Will to come home. You said that you wanted to stop by. I just want you to know that I can't talk long. My son is coming by with the kids and then we're going to Scandia to ride the go-karts. Will was relieved. At least he wouldn't have to explain things to his neighbor yet. When that conversation happened, it would only be a few short hours before the rest of the small complex knew what was going on. That's okay. We can talk later. I have some things to tell you that you're going to find very interesting, Will said. Mr. Williams smiled and said, You know, there's a pull on you. The bets are that you are a spy, working for the government or gay. I got 5 on the government thing. Mr. Williams got a shrewd look in his eye. Where would you put your money? Oh geez, Just let me know who wins, will ya? He figured that the neighbors would already know about the investigator, but the gossip was already flying and imaginations were having a field day. Besides, how would they settle the bet when they realized that no one was right? We can talk Thursday or Friday, if that doesn't interfere with your schedule. Mr. Williams laughed. No, it won't interfere, but I'll check with my secretary just in case. Have her call me if there's a problem. Good night and have fun. Thanks. Mr. Williams went into his apartment and shut the door. Will stood outside his door and looked at the card that was still tucked into the door. Apparently it was better for the gossip if everyone could read what it said as confirmation of Mr. Williams' story. Will opened his door and looked at the pile of mail on the dining table. The envelope from the draft board was the thickest, so he opened it first. Inside were several forms, a health questionnaire, an employment history worksheet and instructions on how to fill them out. There was also a letter printed on Air Force stationery. Dear Mr. Thornton, thank you for volunteering for service with the United States Air Force. My name is Staff Sergeant Thomas Allenson. I am the recruiting officer for the area you live in. I just want you to know what to expect as we work through the paperwork for your enlistment. First, I want you to be aware that I know of your special circumstances. A preliminary background investigation has already determined that you have not had a name or gender change. According to regulations, I cannot use an alias while working with you. I hope that won't be an issue for you. Second, the forms I enclosed are required for your security clearance. Because of the circumstances surrounding your enlistment, a top-secret clearance is required. It was felt that the normal enlistment investigation could be combined with the security investigation. As you can understand, caseloads for investigations have been severe, and combining work for the agents helps reduce that load. You'll probably be hearing from the investigator working your case within the next few days. He'll probably ask you to complete similar paperwork to that which I enclosed. Third, your enlistment in the Air Force job that you will be assigned to will depend greatly on the outcome of the investigation. Please be as forthcoming as possible during the investigation. If you are not what you claim or it is learned that you are trying to avoid service, criminal charges may be filed. Draft evasion is a federal offense. I sincerely hope things work out for you and you have a long career with the United States Air Force. Sergeant Allenson OHSHIT. Will rushed to the phone and started dialing before he remembered that Gary wouldn't be at work. While trying to find Gary's number in his organizer, Will dropped the awkward binder and ripped the page from it. He dialed the number and got a busy signal. Oh, for crying in the sink. As soon as Will hung up to try again, the phone rang. Christ. Hello. Will practically shouted in greeting. I didn't think you thought so highly of me. It was Gary. No, man, did you read the letter that you got? It looks like they're going to take us anyway. Will was in a panic. Yeah, I read it. Did you get an appointment for testing? I didn't see. Will glanced around and saw a yellow slip of paper lying on the floor. Was it on yellow paper? Yes, see if we have the same time and day. Gary asked. July 31st at 8 o'clock, for the ASFOB, will summarize the details. Same as mine, that's only 2 weeks away. If we're going to do this, it'll have to be all the way. Yeah, I know. We'll have to tell Human Resources and I'll stop by my agency before work tomorrow. Will felt depressed and his voice echoed his emotion. It'll be hard, but it's better than being in the military. Thanks for calling. Misery loves company. I feel better knowing that I won't be doing this alone. Me too, talk to you at work. Gary hung up before Will could say goodbye. Will found himself wishing that he had taken Janelle up on her offer to go shopping. At least he would have had some company instead of sipping a beer alone in the dark, wondering why he was becoming so determined to continue with the plan. Eventually he fell asleep on the couch. Will woke with a splitting headache and a sore neck from sleeping in an awkward position. He quickly showered and shaved and dressed in slacks and a polo shirt, and with an effort left his trademark ball cap on the dining room table. No one said a word to Will all day, and he skipped lunch. With the stress and drinking the night before, he just wasn't very hungry. With the office quiet and the client account project drawing to a close, the day crawled by and Will found himself looking forward to the shopping trip. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, Janelle's voice was a welcome break to the monotony of proofreading terms of use documents for the new website. Ready to go? She was excited and was shifting from foot to foot in anticipation. Will shut off his monitor and reached to adjust his hat. He grasped at air before he realized that he wasn't wearing it. He suddenly felt naked and missed the hat dearly. "I'm ready, let's go." The first stop was at the Salvation Army thrift store. Will was surprised. "Why here?" "Well, you can't have everything new. That'll be obvious to anyone who's looking. You've got to have your favorite worn jeans, old comfortable sweatpants. I figured we can't just build a wardrobe, we have to build a life. And the stuff here won't be expensive." Janelle had obviously thought a lot about how to build Will's wardrobe. Will couldn't argue her logic. Soon he found himself drawn into a running conversation about his style preferences as Janelle held up item after item. They left with several pairs of jeans, sweatpants, t-shirts, and a couple of nice tops. Janelle then took Will on a tour of closeout and factory outlet stores. After the second store, Will finally relaxed and even changed into some of the clothes they had bought. Janelle had adjusted his hair with a brush and tiny bottle of hairspray that she kept in her purse for emergencies. She even insisted that he wear lip gloss and mascara so that he would attract less attention. After she finished, Will stopped in front of an office that had mirrored windows and inspected his reflection. He thought he looked a little more feminine, but something was still wrong. Janelle stood next to him and said, "You look good, Will, but you don't have a figure." She tugged on the loose fabric of the slacks he was wearing. "See, you don't have hips, or a butt, and you don't have boobs. For the interview Gary loaned me something that had pads. I had a figure then." "Oh. Do you know where he got it?" "No, it wasn't even his." "I know because it would have been too big for him. He said that he got it from a cross-dressing friend who had to keep his stuff at Gary's for the sake of his marriage." Janelle looked crestfallen. "Oh. Well, I think I might know a place that might be able to help. It's a store in the mall that does custom fittings for women who have had surgery." "Why would we want to go to a medical store?" "It's not a medical store, it's a brassiere. It's the only place I can think of that might have what you need." "That sounds expensive." Will had already spent almost $800, and even though his bank account could easily handle 3 more shopping trips, he didn't want to spend the money if he could help it. As a contract web developer, he often had times when there was little to no work and had to live on his savings. "I don't know, honestly I've never been in there and I don't know anyone who has needed to get falsies." Janelle bit her lip thoughtfully. "But it can't hurt to check, and besides you do need underwear. At least you can get that and come back to pick anything else up." "You're right. Might as well get this over with." 1/4 inch Will walked back toward the car and waited with the bags until Janelle could open the trunk and unlock the doors. The store did sell shapewear, and they weren't surprised by Will's request. The lady who owned the store helped Will herself. "There is a nice gender community here in town. Several of the girls come here so that I can help them too. Also, groups in other towns will have outings to shop where no one will recognize them. Several of those groups have discovered my store. If it weren't for the gender community, I would lose almost half my sales," the shopkeeper explained. Will was still embarrassed during the fitting. She took measurements across his chest and under his arms, then just under his pecs and across his nipples. She then measured his waist and hips. After she had an idea, she came out with several peach-colored boxes and several bras. She had him try on the bras, helping him with the clasps, until she was satisfied with the fit. She then had him take it off and she opened one of the boxes. Inside was a flesh-colored object. It didn't look anything like the gel insert that he had worn to the interview. This looked much more realistic and it was larger. "I've fitted you with a B cup. I didn't think you wanted to be too big, these can take a bit to get used to." She took another identical to what Will had on and slid the form into a pocket on the front. She opened another box and did the same to the other side of the bra. "Here, Han, try this on." She helped Will take the bra off and helped him with the clasps of the new one. "Look in the mirror and tell me what you think." Will found himself staring down at his chest. He was surprised by the weight. Then he looked up and stared at his reflection. It looked as if he had real breasts. The sales lady clucked and asked him to take the whole thing off. "That's almost right, but not good enough." She opened a drawer and pulled out several thin, oddly shaped pieces of fabric, covered foam rubber. These she slid into pockets on the bra and had Will try the whole thing on again. This time she smiled as Will's mouth opened slightly in surprise. He had thought that they had looked realistic before, now he was dumbfounded. The extra pads gave additional shape and fullness so that it looked like there were more than just 2 orbs on his chest. Now it looked like the flesh flowed slightly up his chest and under his arms. "Wow." Janelle had stuck her head through the curtain when she heard Will's gasp of surprise. "That will look great with the tops you just bought. How much will it cost?" The sales lady was quick with numbers. "The prosthetics are $3.50 a pair, the foam inserts are $15 a set, the bra is $23. You should get a couple sets of the foam inserts and a couple of the bras. I have another one that has a smooth front for wear under t-shirts, it's $20. All of that will come to $446, before tax." Will flushed. "I'll take it all." He was embarrassed and a little ashamed that he liked the effect so much. But after seeing his reflection he knew he would have gladly paid twice as much. "Do you want to wear that out?" the sales lady asked. "No. I'm not ready for that yet." Will took off the bra and quickly put his shirt back on. Staring in the mirror he couldn't get over the change that just breasts could make in a woman's appearance. Without them he looked drab, unfinished. As he finished buttoning the shirt he could hear Janelle ask what could be done about hips. "We have several foundations that have interchangeable pads for the derriere and hips. We started keeping them in stock for our special clients." The sales lady stepped into a back room and came out with 2 more sealed bags. "I took her measurements and set these aside just in case she wanted them. They are more expensive than the bras but worth the figure that you can get from them." Janelle set the 2 packages to the side of the boxes and bags that were already stacked on the counter. "These will be a gift from me." She was fishing out her credit card when Will stepped out of the fitting room. The women turned to look at him. "You looked good, but that blouse fit a lot better before," the sales lady said. "Why don't you try this on too?" Janelle held out one of the packages she just paid for. Will was feeling pretty good and kind of numb by the changes. He took the package from her and stepped back into the changing room. He opened the package by tearing the top open and dumped the contents on the counter in front of the mirror. Several foam pads, an instruction sheet, and the garment fell out. Will looked at the instructions and learned that the pads fit into pockets on the inside of what the instructions called a panty corselet. There were several sized pads and the instructions explained that they could be worn in such a way to add dimension to the buttocks and hips. He slipped one each of the shaped pads into the appropriate pockets and slipped his slacks off. He was still wearing his briefs, so he slipped those off too. Will slid the corselet up his legs and over his hips. He then pulled the zipper shut. It had light boning that kept the long waist from rolling down as he wore it. He felt a firm but gentle pressure around his middle and the crotch was very snug. He unzipped and adjusted himself so that he wouldn't slip out of the crotch and have a painful pinch. After zipping back up, he looked at his reflection in the mirror. Once again, he was surprised by the result. His hips now had a very feminine shape and the construction of the garment flattened his groin, making his genitals all but disappear. Turning, he looked at his side profile and admired the curve of his back to his now padded bottom. After tugging and adjusting the garment so that it felt better, he slid back into his slacks and tucked his blouse into the waistband. Again, he looked at his reflection. The face staring back at him hadn't changed, but a light flush, the lip gloss, hair and mascara definitely helped to soften his features. Not quite feminine, but not masculine either, rather, his face was very androgynous. And so was his body. While the shirt hung loosely, the slacks now had a crisp look with no loose cloth on his hips and bum. Will found himself staring and decided that the corselet wasn't that noticeable. Not he quickly placed the extra pads and his now useless briefs back into the corselet's package and stepped back into the store. "That looks good," Janelle whispered as she carefully eyed his figure. "You need to pay for this stuff, the mall is going to close soon." Will looked at his watch, noticing that the chunky masculine style clashed with his less than masculine look. "I didn't realize how late it is. Can we do this again after I get paid?" Now it was Janelle's turn to be surprised. "Sure, I like shopping, but what changed? I thought that you were uncomfortable and only wanted to get enough stuff to get by." "I was and do. I am still uncomfortable, but I think that finishing the look will help," Will explained. The sales lady took Will's credit card and license and rang up the total. Will signed the credit slip and gathered up the packages. Once they were back in the mall common, Janelle asked, "What do you mean by finishing the look?" "Well, for one, this watch doesn't look right now. And there are other things that don't look right either." "Like what?" "While I was changing, I looked closely at my reflection. I think I need to do something better with my hair, maybe earrings, makeup, nails, and extra hair on my arms and chest." "I don't think that the hair on your arms is that bad," Janelle offered, "and you don't need a lot of makeup." "That watch does have to go though." "Well, maybe not the arms, it is pretty thin. But I know that you saw the hair on my chest. And I do have to shave my face. My beard is blonde and doesn't grow fast, but I do have one and I think I need to learn how to use makeup to hide." "Okay, you do have chest hair, and some on your back. But it's not a lot and it can probably be waxed. I can make an appointment for you if you want to have that all done at once." "They can do that?" Will's knowledge of beauty salons was just what the signs in their windows offered, hair and nails. "Sure, let me take care of it. We can both go, I'd kind of like some pampering too." "Okay, make the appointments for after work." Will listened as Janelle talked about her girlfriends and their boyfriends and how she couldn't find any guys that she liked. He watched her gestures and how she touched up her lipstick in the rearview mirror while waiting at a stoplight. As the light changed, Will's stomach growled from hunger. Janelle laughed and said, "I'm hungry too, why don't we stop somewhere and get something to eat?" "That's the best idea I've heard all day," Will agreed. Janelle pulled into the parking lot of Fresh Choice and parked the car. As Will opened the door, he panicked again. Shopping was one thing, now he was going into a restaurant looking like a woman. He froze. "What's wrong?" Janelle asked. "I don't think I am ready for this." Will hoped that she would just take him back to get his car and he could eat at home, in privacy. "Don't be silly, you look fine. No one gave you a second look in the mall. No one will care here either." She walked around to the other side of the car and started pulling Will's arm. Look, people will notice if you don't calm down and relax. If you give them something to look at, they will. And then you'll just be stared at. What's so bad about that? They'll be staring, that's what. Come on, you'll feel better when you are inside and have something to eat. She was still pulling at Will's arm. Slowly Will stood up and allowed Janelle to lead him inside. There were a few other people in line and none of them looked up from their trays or the array of salads in the display in front of them. See? No one notices a thing. Come on. Janelle paid for their dinners and handed Will a tray. Will grabbed a plate and started down the line and built a healthy salad. As he moved down the line, he glanced around and watched the other customers. Across from him was a man who looked to be in his 70s. He didn't even look up. Will relaxed and let Janelle do the talking when they got to the beverages. She ordered 2 Diet Cokes and gave Will his. Once they were seated, she asked, "What do you want to be called?" "There aren't many girls named Will, you know." "Cindy," Will asked before taking a bite of bread. "Just Cindy?" "Cindy Janice Marshall." "That sounds familiar, it'll be easy to remember." "Why are you going to change your last name?" "That's because it is. I got the name from the Brady Bunch, Jan, Marcia and Cindy. I don't have a good reason to change my last name. It's just thought that it would be somehow easier to change it all." "Oh." They sat and ate in silence for about 10 minutes before Cindy asked, "Do you like boys or girls?" Will chocked and coughed before saying, "Girls." Cindy handed him a napkin and smiling said, "I just had to be sure. There are a couple of guys over there checking us out." Will thought he was going to die. "I told you no one would notice. You're lucky that your hair hasn't thinned and that you aren't a big jock. It looks to me like you are pretty convincing." "Yeah, okay. You've proven your point. Can we go now?" Janelle took one last sip of her Coke and agreed. Will watched through the corner of his eye as the 2 guys watched them leave the restaurant. "Get used to it. You're a girl now," Janelle said as she unlocked the doors. Janelle drove the last few miles in silence. The guys watching them gave Will a lot to think about. After dropping Will off and helping him transfer shopping bags to his car, Janelle spoke up again. "I think I'm going to start calling you Cindy. It'll only help you settle in and maybe help others make the change as well." "I suppose so, but only do it around people that know what's going on." "Thanks for the help. I don't think I could have done this on my own." "I know you saved me a lot of frustration and money," Will said, then he gave Janelle a quick goodbye hug. "Anytime, Cindy." Janelle hugged him back and then got in her car and drove away. Will started his car and drove home. By the time he arrived, it was dark and none of his neighbors were outside their apartments. Will opened the trunk to his car and gathered the bags and carried them in. After putting the new clothes away, Will had a pile of his older clothes sitting on his bed. Silently, he put them into garbage bags and shoved them into the back of a closet. He had been careful to only remove his older clothes. He still refused the possibility of dressing as a woman as a long-term solution, a couple of years at the most. He undressed and made sure that the prosthetic breasts were placed correctly in the boxes that were also designed to store them. After taking off corselet and putting it in the laundry, he looked in the bathroom mirror. He still had on mascara, the lip gloss had gone during dinner, and his hair was still in the shape that Janelle had brushed it. Using soap and water, he cleaned his face and looked at his reflection again. He couldn't explain why. Suddenly he felt disgusted, a feeling that he hadn't felt while dressed up. Thinking about this latest turn, Will went to bed. He pulled the sheets over his head and soon fell asleep. Will woke when his alarm went off at 7. He stumbled to the bathroom to shower and shave, then he got dressed. His fingers fumbled on the buttons until he remembered that the shirt he took out of the closet was from the women's rack. After thinking about the situation for a moment, he concentrated on the buttons and finished getting dressed. Before leaving for the day, he called his supervisor at the insurance company and left a message saying that he had to stop by his agency on the way to work. He locked up before going to his car and starting the long drive across town in the morning traffic. Halfway to the agency offices, he remembered that his hat was still on the dining table. Will got to the agency just as the receptionist was unlocking the front door. Will signed in and waited for Christy, his job agent, to call him to her desk. "Hi, Will. I wasn't expecting to see you today. I have some good news for you though." "Oh great," Will thought, with everything else happening, what could this be? "I just got off the phone with Deborah. She just extended your contract for another year and agreed to give you a $2 raise." Christy beamed at Will across her desk. "Well, that is good news. I had no idea." This news was the last thing Will was expecting to hear. "You didn't know? Then what prompted you to stop by today? You weren't thinking of leaving Interglobal, were you?" "Oh no, nothing like that. I like Interglobal and the people I work with. There is something else I need to talk about, and I would rather do that in private." Now Christy looked concerned. Contractors didn't usually ask for a private meeting unless something major was about to happen. "Sure, I think no one is using the interview room. Why don't we go in there?" Will waited for Christy to shut the door and settle into a chair before he started. I need to tell you something that must be kept in confidence." Christy nodded sympathetically. "Go on." Will steeled himself before saying, "I'm a transsexual." Christy blinked and looked closely at Will. Her eyes finally settled on his shirt, then she looked him in the eye. "You were a woman?" It was Will's turn to blink. That was the second time she surprised him. "No, I am becoming a woman." Christy blushed, and Will couldn't help asking, "Why did you think that I was becoming a man?" "You don't look masculine. I mean, you're thin, you aren't very muscular, and you don't have a lot of body hair. And it's just that I get a feeling of femininity that doesn't match your look as a guy." This was almost too much for Will. "I don't know what to say. We don't have a lot of paperwork to do here. All we have to do is amend your records to show your new status." "Are you going to change your name?" "No, I don't think I'll be changing my name just yet, but there is a name that I may start using." Cindy Janice Marshall. Christy wrote the name on a piece of scratch paper. "I'll add that to your record as a nickname. We have excellent support policies here. You aren't the first in this situation. The biggest problems you'll face will come from the company you contract with. I do have to ask you though, when are you going to tell human resources at Interglobal?" "I was planning on doing that today, after I leave here. There is something else. An investigator from the government might ask about me. It's related to the draft." "That won't be a problem, will it? Our policy here is full cooperation." "No, that's not a problem. I just wanted to tell you before he came around asking questions." Christy seemed satisfied. "Call me if there are any problems with Interglobal. We can help you. I'll let you know if there is anything we need your signature on." "Thanks, Christy. That's all I wanted." Will felt a lot better as he left. The ball was rolling, and now that his secret was out in the open, he didn't have to worry about the agency's reaction. As Will drove to the Interglobal offices, he reflected on the last few weeks. He felt as if he was living someone else's life. He had gone from a fairly content single guy who had occasional luck with the ladies to being a transsexual. He tried to find the line he had crossed. At first, he thought it was going to the armory in the first place, but now he wasn't sure. He was feeling that all he was doing was, somehow, right. The dreams had not stopped either. Instead, they were only getting more vivid. He found more and more of his idle time focused on interpreting the dreams. They all revolved around times in his life that he was most happy. But they also included getting into trouble for acting like a girl. Like that time in first grade. As Will pulled into the Interglobal parking lot, he started concentrating on what he would say to HR. Will worried about all the possibilities that could come from the meeting. As far as he knew, there was no stopping Interglobal from firing him on the spot. Maybe they would send a company-wide bulletin or require that he immediately start dressing and behaving as Cindy. In spite of how Janelle felt, Will just was not ready for that. Then he remembered what he was wearing. After taking a moment to calm the rising tide of panic, Will reasoned that he had to wear something, just to make his case more believable. While the white shirt was far from feminine, anyone with an eye could tell that the buttons were on the wrong side. And the shoes he was wearing had a low vamp that showed more of his instep than any man's shoe would, not to mention that he wasn't wearing socks with them either. He looked at his reflection in the glass doors as he walked towards the employee entrance. Overall, the clothes didn't make that much difference, they were traditional business colors. And the pants didn't even look feminine. Androgynous, definitely androgynous, Will thought to himself as he opened the door and waved his ID badge at the security guard. Will quickly walked down the hall and into the Human Resources office, signed in and looked over the list of names to see who had come in before him. He didn't see Gary's name anywhere. Will sat waiting for several minutes. Just as he felt boredom trying to overtake him, a young man picked up the clipboard, wrote something on it, and called Will's name. Will stood to follow him and found himself becoming nervous again. He didn't know if he felt right talking about this with another guy. "This is kind of personal, I think I would rather talk with a female," Will said, cringing. "Oh. I can help you with whatever the problem is." The younger man was nice, but he seemed put off by the request. "Sorry," Will apologized, "I didn't mean anything by that, it's just that this really is a personal matter and I would just feel more comfortable talking with a woman." "Okay, I can see if my supervisor can help." "Thanks, that would be great." The young man walked around a cube wall and disappeared from Will's view. Will stood nervously playing with his ID badge and looking for anything to distract him, settled on an aerial photograph of the Interglobal campus. "Can I help you?" Will jumped, he was so intent on the photo that he hadn't heard the lady walk up behind him. "I hope so. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" "We have an empty office, it's just over here." Will followed, grateful for the few moments before he would have to explain why he was there. After making sure the door was shut, the supervisor sat on a corner of the desk and asked, "What's wrong?" Will remained standing. "I suppose I need to amend my personnel records." "Oh." Will realized that he hadn't thought about what he should say or how. Instead, he just blurted, "I'm a transsexual." The HR supervisor didn't even blink. "My records need to be amended to show that I am in the process of transitioning from male to female. I don't really know what the procedure is for amending my records for that. And I want to keep this fairly quiet for now," Will explained. "Let me get this straight, you want your records to be changed to show that you are a woman?" "No. I want the records to show that I am in the process of changing my body to be a woman. I don't expect anything to change. I just want the company to be aware of my situation, just in case anything happens, and to make things easier later." "What could happen?" "I don't know. Anything really, harassment, bathroom disputes, maybe I fall down the stairs and need treatment. And I suppose, for my peace of mind. And to make sure that Interglobal knows that I am not trying to keep important secrets that it should be aware of." "I take it then that you want to be able to use a different bathroom?" the supervisor asked. "Yes, I mean no. Maybe later, not right now. I mean not yet." Will was confused about why she would jump to that question. Do you have any doctor's letters? No, but I can if you need them. No, it's not needed, but it would help if anything did come up. When you decide that you want to start coming to work as a woman, we will need something for insurance and legal reasons. The supervisor explained. I understand. Just let me know when you'll need them. You do know that in California transsexuality is protected as a disability, don't you? Your job can't be threatened, but you do need a diagnosis to claim that protection. No, I didn't. Is there anything I need to sign or paperwork or something? Will was eager to bring the interview to a close. I'll have to look to see if there is an existing policy regarding this. It's possible that you'll be breaking new ground. Can I have your badge so I can write down your employee number? Absolutely. Will handed her his ID badge. Just wait here a second. The supervisor left the room and returned after a couple of short minutes with a piece of paper. She copied the name and employee number off the card. Will, is there another name that you use? Yes, Cindy Janice Marshall. She wrote that down and handed Will's badge back. I'll email or call you when we have things ready for you. I'm sure there will be more paperwork for you, but I don't want to make you wait while we get things together. Thanks. One last thing, I don't want a lot of people knowing about this just yet. I understand. I'm treating this conversation as confidential. I'll work on this myself. No one else needs to know unless you are comfortable telling them. Also, please let me know whom you tell. That way I know who it is safe to discuss this with. Thank you. Will looked at her ID badge. Mrs. Woods, I'll let you know. Mrs. Woods escorted back to the HR lobby and wished him luck. Will took the elevator to the floor and quickly walked to his desk. After sitting down, he sighed in relief that no one had seen him come in. At least he would be able to get some work done before lunch. It was 12:15 when Gary and Janelle distracted Will and asked him if he was ready to eat. As Will turned from his computer, Janelle gave him a quick inspection and smiled when she realized what he was wearing. Will raised his finger in warning, just for today and only to help my case with my agency and HR. Is that why you were late? Gary asked. Yes. And I've been to HR. I chickened out, Gary confessed. I thought so. I didn't see your name on the sign-in sheet. Maybe I should sick Janelle on you. Hey, you did that on your own. Cindy, Janelle stressed Will's femme name to make her point. Only because I knew you would nag me until I did, Will shot back. Well, maybe you're right. So Gary, when are you going to have the talk? Gary groaned and rolled his eyes. I swear I'll make an appointment when we get back from lunch, anything to keep you off my back. Now we know why she doesn't have a boyfriend, Will joked, then dodged the slap aimed for his shoulder. Hey, you asked for that, Gary laughed as Janelle cornered Will and playfully swatted the arm he held up in defense. While the friends ate, Will explained what happened that morning and Gary quizzed him about what he should say when he spoke with HR. By the time they had finished eating, Gary was more confident about having the conversation himself. They parted company as they got off the elevator and the afternoon sped by. Gary made an appointment to speak with the HR supervisor the following morning. Will was ready and waiting when Janelle stopped by his desk to let him know it was time to go to their beauty appointment. Neither one of them noticed the silver Chevrolet sedan follow them to the beauty salon. Nor did they notice as the driver used a telephoto lens to take their pictures while they had their hair, nails, and eyebrows done. He took several candid shots of Janelle while she waited for Will's wax session to finish. He took even more pictures when they left the shop, each of them carrying a bag of hair products. The investigator smiled when he realized that Will's hair was a couple of inches longer and done in an easy style that framed his face. The style suited him quite well. After Will and Janelle drove off, he took the spent roll of film from the camera and marked it with Will's name. He put it in a bag next to several rolls marked with Gary's name. It had been an interesting couple of days.